Welcome back to the Brent and Austen Show, streaming on the Action Sports Jax 24/7 network.
Got the Jaguars offensive line. I'm going to tell you right now, Anton Harrison, let's put him in some bubble wrap and get him out because I've never seen two pancakes. Literally, dude went back-to-back flapjacks within 3 seconds from Anton Harrison last night on a pretty decent run by Tank Bigsby. Hamby, overall, your thoughts of the second preseason game, and it's weird that we're sitting here because I feel like the first two preseason games, the Jaguars have really dominated in a lot of facets. But I don't know why there's still some things I want to nitpick and say, well, I'm not quite confident yet. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm thinking we might have to go get another guard. Because, I mean, well, shoot, Foster had a rough game at left tackle. It doesn't take a whole lot of, X's and O's for anybody watching to see that. But that's not the biggest area of concern because, he would be not even third because of Walker Little. I can live with him having a rough game, no problem. It's not what I wanted to see, but I'm talking more, I don't know, Shatley, Cooper Hodges doesn't, I don't know. It just seemed like our second string line, we can't afford any injuries to the first stringers.
Brent, we win 20-7. Should we not be worried at all? Should we be happy with these 2 wins, or is still there's some things to be questioning here?
No, listen, I like what you guys are saying. I think there's reason to nitpick, and that's what this time of year is for, right? Be a little bit concerned about some things. But I also think you've got to acknowledge the fact that the Jags dominated that game on the offensive side. They controlled the ball. At one time I looked up, and it was like 133 yards, I think, going into the fourth quarter for Tampa. And I didn't even actually think the Jags defense had played well. Like, they gave up a quick drive, and their run defense on the early downs was not good. So it's like, wait a minute, giving up 133 yards. So maybe, Austin, the defense didn't play well, but the defense didn't play well, but the offense had a 10-play drive and a 17-play drive to pretty much dominate the game. And it would have been more domination if, let's just say, Mac Jones and Elijah Cooks connect a couple more times on some plays that they had in their hands to connect on. So the one thing I'll say about the offensive line, which I think you can be critical of, Austin, is the fact that they still haven't played together. Anton Harrison and Ezra Cleveland weren't in game one. They were here out there in game two, but not with the other 3 guys. So all the good, all the bad, I think you take with a little bit of a grain of salt, but it is all we have to go on right now. And I think everybody's main worry of the season going in was probably the offensive line, and I'm not sure they've alleviated that yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a concern, and obviously on the other side of the ball as well, something that was a concern last year that some could say really cost the Jaguars a playoff opportunity, and I think why Ryan Nielsen was brought here in the first place is the ability to stop the run. And I think last night in a couple of series, especially early on in that game, you saw linebackers not fitting the right gaps. You saw bad lane discipline in terms of the cutbacks and everything. And once again, these are 2s and 3s that we're talking about here. So how much stake do you put into it? But it's starting to be a repetitive thing now when we're talking about, will this team be able to stop the run?
Yeah, and I got to feel like they will be able to stop the run. The one guy that hasn't been out there much is Foye Oluokun. I mean, what's he played, like 5 snaps, guys, in the preseason? And he's the guy that kind of puts the band together. And so I think when you're missing gaps and things like that, that could be part of the problem. Foye is an important part of it. He's the quarterback of that defense. Again, I'm trying to come up with reasons. I'm not discounting what you're saying. It is what we have. But we also have very few reps of the guys that are going to be out there. And I think maybe the bigger thing to look at was how they handled the practices against the Bucs, and those went pretty well, according to most, in favor of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think, they're going to have some concerns. They've got to bottle some things up. You definitely don't want to be out of place against Miami Dolphins in week 1, Austin, because they'll burn you.
No, without a doubt. And what I wanted to get into, we can get into it later, we can get into it right now, but I felt like obviously this Bucs offense didn't have a lot to celebrate. I mean, if you look at it in totality, I mean, the Jaguars were big on money down. The Bucs go 2 for 11. That's big on third down. I like to see that. Penalties were a little higher than I wanted to see from the Jaguars, but still, I mean, under 10, you're doing okay. I think they had 9, if I'm not mistaken, but to me, what really stood out was when the Bucs wanted to go RPO. Now, once again, this is the preseason, so I was expecting a little more vanilla offense and everything. But when you saw the RPO and the Jaguars were in base defense, you saw Trask actually gain a little more confidence because the Jaguars are stacking the box. And if you run an RPO and if you know how to do it correctly, you can say, okay, they're loading the box right now. Let's go to my receiver. Okay, they're a little soft right now in coverage. Let's run the ball. And you saw that a couple times in Tampa Bay. Now, I don't think Kyle Trask is an RPO king by any means. I don't even consider Tampa Bay to be an offense that's going to do a lot of RPO. But I see a team in Miami that can thrive off that. I see a team in Miami that can thrive off, change of directions, that can, thrive off motions and things like that. And obviously they have the big playability. That's what scares me more than anything, I think, last night was in this defense. And I get you didn't see everything from Ryan Nielsen, and I'm sure he's going to show a lot more wrinkles in terms of what it's going to look like. But if you're in your base defense and you're not going to change anything around, I wonder if you're going to be susceptible to teams that like to run the RPO.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That's why I like your opinions on this. That's something I wouldn't catch necessarily, and we'll see if that becomes a problem or it's something that they can fix. Hamby, I just asked this to the social media world and the folks that are listening. 2 weeks of the preseason. Let's take it on a bigger picture, guys. What do you like the most? And it's okay to say, what do you like the least? It'll put you on the spot a little bit, but what jumps out at you? Because I think our minds always want to go negative. It's so funny. The Jags don't win any games for like 10 years, and any time they line up against somebody. They've actually, like you said, Austin, dominated a couple of football games for the most part here on these Saturdays in Jacksonville, but I still feel like we go to the other side of it where it's like, that offensive line and other things. So best thing in the last 2 weeks that makes you feel good, worst thing, and I mean, we've been talking a little bit about it. You're probably going to go there. What do you got, Hamby?
I mean, it makes me feel good that we've won. I mean, when nobody ever, we talk about the individuals so much, and rightfully so, but we've won, and it seems like we've been in full control of both of these football games. And I know that obviously with 80 different players playing in them, it's tough to put anything into that, but it just seems like we're in control, that there's not been any panic, that for the most part we've been in the right place at the right time. Like Austin said, it's been pretty clean football for the most part. I know Seth Williams fumble late in the game. We had a few penalties, but in the first game, very little penalties. And it's been relatively clean. Also, the defense has looked good in both. I think, how many points did we give up to the Chiefs? What was it? Is it 10? Or 13? 13 to the Chiefs and 7 to the Bucs. And we had, I don't know how many 3-and-outs consecutively in Saturday night's game. Seemed like it was a bunch in a row. So you got to like that too. Nielsen looks like he's got command of the defense, and looks like he's got everybody where they're supposed to be.
Austin, what do you think?
As someone is playing a giant game of horseshoes, it sounds like in the back, I'm going to say that the thing I like the most would be, I can say just Tank Bigsby in general, right? In terms of running the football and then the vision there. I think he seems to really progress since his first year. But I think if you want to put like a more big umbrella on it, I just think what this offense looks like so far, what the goal is going to be, where you're going to pound the rock, you're going to have play action, and then take your deep shots. I like what that's going to look like. Now, you have to get better blocking from the interior. You have to be able to actually run the football time in and time out. But if they can actually do that, and if they can establish the line of scrimmage and be physical to set up some of those receivers in the vertical game, I like that a lot. So I just think it's more of wishful thinking at this point, because we have to see ones-on-ones. We have to see them run the football with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. But I think the possibilities of what it could be, I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, it's a good call. I like both of what you guys said. I think just overall the offense, it looks like they've got it. It doesn't matter if it's Trevor running it in the first teamers or if it's Mac running it in the second teamers, and at times it's even been C.J. Beathard, and I don't even know how he graded C.J. Beathard the other day. I mean, he was like, he had people in his face the whole time. So by that time of the game, you're at a little bit of you're at a disadvantage because you're playing with, again, guys 78 on the roster blocking for you, and that's a tough thing, and there is a drop-off. I don't care even if you think you're good. There is a drop-off when it gets to that point. So, yeah, I just think it's been a pretty fluid operation, and that's what you want to see. I mean, it's year 3 of this offense. It's Press Taylor, Mike McCoy, Doug Peterson, Trevor Lawrence. We've seen these guys. I mean, and credit to Mac, he's come in, in a new system and looks like he can run it comfortably, but that's always been a strength of his, to be able to understand an offense and to be able to deliver. I'm still concerned about their running game, and especially on the short yardage stuff. They had a 3rd and 2 the other day about midfield. They got stuffed on it. Then they had to go for it on 4th and 1, and it was a quarterback sneak from Mac Jones. But you have a couple opportunities in the preseason at 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and I still think it's been a little questionable in those short yardage situations. And the other thing is, take Bigsby. He ran, I think, 10 times for 37 yards, which isn't a great clip. But if you look at some of the numbers, all those yards were done like after contact. Like, that's a little like game within a game, Austin, where you're like, oof. That's not good blocking if that back has to be getting all those yards after contact. And there are a lot of that's a big stat anyway. There are a lot of guys that just have to get more after contact. Like, you're not a good running back if you don't get a lot after contact. But all 37 of them, can somebody open up a lane for Tank Bigsby, Austin?
No, and this is kind of the night and day of what you saw compared to the Jaguars defense. Like Tank Bigsby had to earn his yards, it seemed like, play in and play out. And you do like the yards after contact. Now his longest yard or his longest run was 6 yards, but like it seemed like he always got positive yards regardless of where he's getting hit in the backfield. And you like to see that, because the last thing that you want to see from this team is to come out week 1 against Miami, get stuffed on the line. Now we're talking 2nd and 10 or 3rd and 8. This team needs to thrive in playing within like 2nd and 6, 3rd and 4. If you get those types of down and distances, this team can thrive. What you don't want to see is 1st down, hand the ball off to probably Travis Etienne more than Tank Bigsby at 1st down, and you get stuffed at the line of scrimmage. Like, you have to get positive yards to be successful in this offense. On the other side of the ball, on the defensive side, I think they did a pretty good job of limiting explosive plays, and then that's always like from a defensive coordinator, that's what you want to see, take away explosive plays. But I'm going to be honest. I would rather give up maybe 1 or 2 explosive plays in the run game as opposed to giving up 6 yards here, 10 yards here, 6 yards here, 7 yards here, because then it's almost a consistent thing, right? Like, if you give up an explosive play, maybe a guy had a mental mistake. Maybe there was one giant missed tackle. Maybe, the other team just kind of got lucky on a great play. Those things can happen. Those guys make money too. But what I don't like is when it's 5 yards here, 6 yards there, 10 yards there, because then that starts to become your identity a little more. It's not somebody really making a mistake. It's your defense in totality not playing well. And then I think last night you saw a couple plays where the Buccaneers didn't get out the gate or anything, but you saw 5, 6, 7 yard gains in the run game.
Hamby, I think this is actually pretty good, though, on a lot of levels. Like, I think I would rather be I don't want everything to go swimmingly in the preseason. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we're just going to get too inflated about this team. Like, you've got to have reality checks along the way. I also don't think we should get too high on the highs and too low on the lows. Camp we've seen unfold many different ways. I think they've put more good days together than bad. They put more good moments in these games together than bad. I think those are positive signs. Again, operationally, I think when most of the guys have been in there, it looks pretty good on the offense. Remember, that's supposed to be your identity. So it's okay to have some bad stuff happen. It doesn't mean it's going to play out that way come September 8th and the rest of the regular season, Hamby.
Yeah, and it's, none of the things that have been, big alarm have happened. Number one, we haven't had really any injuries. Okay, so any time, and Balky mentioned,
that's very true.
And Balky mentioned that off the rip when he talked to during the game, we're staying healthy. So that's number one. And then all of the other catastrophic things that can happen, or the big alarms, is your kicker doesn't make kicks. Well, that hasn't happened. Walker Little has made all of his kicks other than the 62-yarder. We can't undersell that.
Cam Little.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cam Little.
All
just
good.
turned 21.
I want to see Walker kick, though. I want to see Walker kick.
That'd be bad. But Cam Little's made his kicks. We haven't fumbled the football a lot. Trevor didn't throw any picks. We haven't had any kickoffs be returned on us for touchdowns. And all of those things, none of those things have happened. So from a bird's eye view, check the boxes.
Austin, do you not have kickoff return against you on your bingo card? As a good check the box, Heavy's going deep there.
No, he's going very deep, man. I mean, yeah, hey, everyone can break it down their own way. But no, I mean, I agree there. Like, listen, we're really nitpicking things here. But like at the end of the day, it's 2 wins, all right? And it's a team that has played from the start of the whistle to the end of the whistle pretty sound football. Now, you haven't seen a lot of explosive plays, which is good, and you haven't seen like a lot of stupid penalties, I feel like. Like I said, I mean, they upped their penalties up this last game, but nothing that's going to like make you raise an eyebrow. I mean, listen, I sat here on this show how many years ago and talked about when I think the Jaguars had 14 penalties in the preseason with Doug Marrone, and I said, this isn't just a one-off thing. This could linger the entire season. Lo and behold, what happened? The whole team fell apart. I think that was back in 18, if I'm not mistaken. So what you see in tendencies sometimes is what you're going to get in the regular season. And I don't think there's any tendencies to say, like, okay, I'm going to be nervous here or there. Like I said, it's just in the run game of getting your fits a little better from the linebacking core. I think they can do a better job. And listen, I'm sitting here wondering, I get why you didn't play Devin Lloyd because he's the starter right now. But at least in the run game, watching Chad Muma, he may have been the most dependable guy I've seen so far in preseason in terms of stopping the run and being in the right spot from the linebacker position. And it's a little weird. I don't want to say it's weird because I understand what it's supposed to look like, and I don't have the all 22 Bucks versus Jaguars training camp videos of how Lloyd did in practice and everything. But from what I've seen from Muma so far in terms of at least stopping the run, and also he's been some pretty good spots in terms of the pass, he's having a pretty good training camp right now. And I wonder if there's even a talk right now, even a question of in base formation, do you maybe try to incorporate Chad Muma at the linebacking spot?
That's an interesting deal right there. By the way, we could have recorded the tower cam and seen if we could see the ants marching a little bit to accommodate that for you, Austin. At least not live on the show, but maybe.
Yeah, man. Nothing like watching some more animal videos, Brent. Why not, man?
It's an interesting. I don't think. And I'm starting to wonder if you've got something against Devin Lloyd. No, I'm just kidding. I know you don't. But I was a little surprised based off some of our conversations of last week that maybe he didn't get a few reps in this game to get more comfortable at that position since it's a new position. But what it told me, Austin, is that because he didn't, they are confident with the way he is playing in practice and what they're seeing. Doesn't that did that say it to you as much as it did to me? Because they did play some starters, Anton Harrison, Brian Thomas Jr., Ezra Cleveland. They had some of those guys in the game on this one on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought. Now, I haven't really heard out of training camp how good Devin Lloyd did against the Buccaneers. So maybe he did good. I have no idea. I can't speak on it because I wasn't there. But the fact that he didn't play in the preseason game, yeah, I guess it goes to show you, like, in Ryan Nielsen we trust, and Doug Peterson we trust. I guess it goes to show you that he must have had a hell of a week, that they didn't really need to play him, especially after his first preseason game. And it's something that I have nothing against, Lloyd. But also I feel like if you're drafted in the first round, you're supposed to be expected, I think, to come in and be a star on this team. And I think the past couple years, since 2022 when he came here, I don't think we're talking about Devin Lloyd in terms of star potential quite yet.
We got to take a time out, but before we do that, I want both your thoughts on this. Hamby, let's start with you. Do you need to see the starters play on Friday? Now, listen, I think they are going to play it. It's my belief. That's the plan, at least, unless something changes with Doug. But the plan was to play them next week, at least for a little bit. I don't know how long. We'll find out that a little bit later in the week. Do you need to see them play as healthy as the Jaguars are? Do you want to see some more from the offense and the defense to feel good before September 8th?
I'd say I would enjoy seeing the offensive line play together as a unit, all 5 of them, like you mentioned. Defensively, I think I'm good. I mean, obviously, it would be phenomenal just to see Eric Armstead in a jersey. We know that's not going to happen, but that would be like the big plus if that did happen. But I'm good on as far as I don't need to see Foye. I don't need to see Josh. I don't need to see maybe the secondary playing some more snaps together. Since we've had some kind of turnover back there. But other than that, I'm good. I think, take it off, stay healthy, and we'll see you in Miami.
Austin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing Trevor just for a couple series with that offensive line, make sure everybody's gelled. Everybody, is used to playing together, because by the time week 1 comes around, you got to be that way. I think I'd love to see the tight ends next to Evan Ingram. Who's going to be like the next man up? Brenton Strange is one of my guys to watch. I think I watched him. I don't know.
He hadn't done a single thing.
I think I watched him. I'm not sure. But did they still
he was out. He was out maybe the earliest. He was out the earliest of everybody else. I couldn't believe how quick he was out of the game.
He had 12. He played 12 snaps.
Okay, well, yeah, then there's your 2 tight end, I guess. Cool. I would want to see more, competition, I guess, because I'm not sold on Brenton Strange being like the 2 tight end right now. I want to see more reps from him to see what he can do. And obviously in that secondary as well, we know what Josh Allen's got. We know what Trayvon Walker's got. I want to see the ones at the linebacker core shore things up a little bit. And obviously I think there's still competition in that secondary. So kind of rotate guys there, especially if you play, they have the Falcons next. So could be a pretty high-powered offense, depending if Kirk Cousins is going to be playing, how they handle that in Atlanta, but still an offense that you have to respect that can beat you a lot of different ways with their run game, with their tight ends, and obviously wide receivers like Drake London as well.
Well, listen, for me, I think they're going to play, so it's like, cool, great. They're going to play, that's good. I have no problem with that. It would have been a long layoff if they didn't play in a game from, whatever was it, August 10th to September 8th. Like, that's one game of football reps basically in a 10-month span or a 9-month span for your football team. Like, that's not a lot. So I don't mind them getting back in. I think it's going to be good that they get back in. But I think just listening to you guys, and Austin, especially you, I want to see that offensive line together. I think that's a chemistry position. I think they have good players individually. I don't know if they have a good offensive line collectively. They've got to start figuring that out, build some confidence, much like we've said about a guy like Tank Bigsby, who appears to be building confidence. Why not say the same about an offensive line, even if there are a veteran group? They don't have to be a young guy to build confidence. And then on the defensive side, I think because the Nielsen stuff is still new, I think it's important for those guys to be on the field, what they're trying to accomplish, some of their rules, some of the basic stuff, to have those guys all out there and maybe answer some of the questions that you had, Austin, about them. So I would like to see them play, and I think they're going to play probably into the second quarter. But stay healthy is obviously the biggest thing. Get to that regular season. I wouldn't mind seeing just a little bit more out of those 2 units specifically. I want to get to some of the things that Trent Baalke said during his interview in the booth. There are a couple of things that I thought really stood out to me, and I want to get Austin's take on it. But before we do that, I want to also reset. Mac Jones was the big story coming out of Saturday. I mean, that was the story, Austin. And now the way things transpired, we wondered if they could keep all 3 of these quarterbacks. And I got a feeling they can, Austin, because of the injury to C.J. Beathard. Is that an easier way to be able to help him clear waivers and stash him on the practice squad so you can have all 3 quarterbacks in the room?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything, because the last thing that a team maybe that's looking for a backup quarterback or like a third-string quarterback, they don't want an injured one, right? So I think it's going to, obviously you never want to see an injury, right? Like they're unfortunate, but I think the silver lining here is that, yes, you can theoretically then keep 3 quarterbacks on this team, have Mac Jones as your backup, and then have C.J. Beathard on that practice squad.
Do you think how do I want to say this? Do you think there are going to be some fans of Mac Jones? I want to make sure I'm not saying this. It's not coming from me. Do you think there will be some fans of Mac Jones coming out of Saturday night
Can't wait to see where this is going.
Go back to when he came back to when they acquired him? It's like, oh, he's pushing Trevor Lawrence, right? I mean, they just signed Trevor Lawrence to a $275 million deal. That's not happening. I'm just wondering if there will be some people that get on the Mac train because of the Pro Bowl year in New England, the national championship at Alabama, and be like, and it might not even be fans, it might be other teams now that make him, going back to last week's conversation, that make him a viable candidate to trade for, try to pick up along the way. Did he open the eyes of other teams on Saturday night?
I mean, I hope so. Now tripping like 3 times out of nowhere and just falling down didn't help per se. But I think the touchdowns and everything and the poise, we can definitely overlook that. If you're a Jaguars fan, and listen, I think we expect Trevor Lawrence to take a step forward here with this offense and everything, with these weapons. But if we're halfway through the season, and heaven forbid we start having the conversation of, should we put Mac in? I mean, if that's the case, then we have a lot bigger things to worry. Like, if we're actually in a realm where we're having the conversation if we should bring in Mac Jones over Trevor Lawrence, then hit all the panic buttons, Hamby. Get a giant one over Brent's head and that beautiful backdrop of that water, because the season is in shambles, okay? So I don't think we're going to have that. I mean, bigger, Make it bigger. Make it a lot bigger. Headbutt it if you have to. No, I don't think in Jacksonville we're going to have those conversations. Now, if we're saying in Minnesota, there we go, much better. But I think if we're nicely done. I think if we're talking about Minnesota, if we're talking about maybe New York now, there might be some teams interested. Then that's great. I want to have those conversations because I don't expect Mac Jones to play here, with all due respect. So if that's the case, then let's go ahead and get as much draft capital as we can for him, and maybe there's going to be a suitor out there that's interested.
Yeah. One other comment. It's interesting because somebody said, it might have been my kid, he's like, man, Mac's clumsy, isn't he? Like, he's clumsy. And you just mentioned the trips a little bit. But you know what's funny? In my mind, I was sitting there probably, I don't know, in the second quarter sometime, and the most critical I've been of Mac Jones is not really his fault. I think he's just doesn't fit today's NFL where it's so mobile. I don't think he's a mobile enough guy. He feels more stature to me. Well, there were a couple of examples in the first half. Take away what you see from the clumsiness of tripping, that he actually moved really well. He picked up the blitz, rolled to his right, ran for a couple yards. He picked up a free runner, rolled to his right, found a receiver. He actually had the pump fake one where he had a guy in his face and then escaped and ran up the gut for a couple. I was actually starting to think, and coming into Monday, I was like, hey, guys, I was a little bit wrong. Like, I actually think he's got a little bit more mobility than I thought. And now he's not going to go run for 60 yards a game, but I thought he, and then there were a couple right after where he like tripped over the 47-yard hash mark. So I had like all this mental gymnastics going on, Austin.
Yeah, no,
in my mind about Mac's mobility.
Yeah. It was definitely all over the place. And it's like I said, I don't want to have the conversation with Mac Jones where if he's in the game and I'm going to ride that roller coaster. I don't want to ride the Mac Jones roller coaster. I mean, he had some great plays, but the trips would drive me crazy. Like, if he was in during the regular season, I can see, like, game on the line, like, second or third down, you're driving, and then he just trips. And then I'm, throwing the remote at the TV, swearing and everything. So I don't want to have to go through that. We have a great quarterback, I think, in Trevor Lawrence, and knock on wood, hopefully he can stay healthy. But, yeah, the last thing I want to see, and if this happens, then I want Twitter handles, I want addresses, I want phone numbers of people who actually say Mac Jones deserves to get some playing time over Trevor Lawrence. Shame on you, and go pick another team.
Yeah, there's your message. That's your PSA. Hey, as you say, roller coaster QB. See, I didn't look at that outing that way, but again, I look at it a little bit differently being down there, and you had it kind of on your television screen.
He fell over his own feet with nobody touching him like 3 times. That's a roller coaster, sir.
I get it. I get it, but in my mind, Austin, he's not there to use his feet. He's there to use his arm, and I thought he had a beautiful throw to Parker, obviously the other touchdown throw to Easton, but I also, the throw he made to Elijah Cooks was so good on that in the 2-minute, and then I think, and I said this on a post-game show, and I have not clarified it, and I'd like to get maybe your thoughts if you saw the same thing. In real live action down on the field, I thought the first big play to Elijah Cooks that they missed on You guys remember the one I was talking about?
Yeah.
That he was wide open. I thought either Cook stumbled a little bit to get where his landmark was, or he just didn't get to his landmark. And I don't know if that was on Mac. I think he probably threw it to the right spot, and it was a little bit slow to get there. That was my interpretation of it. I don't have the knowledge of if that happened, but that was my interpretation. So let's just say he was in the right spot there, and then the beautiful throw that Cooks drops, which was in the 2-minute, which might have actually gone for a touchdown if he caught it and escaped that tackle. I mean, it was like, from the throw-in standpoint, the operation, the offense, it was very good outside of a few stumbles over the hash marks.
Yeah, it was good, and obviously that one was at 3rd and 16, 3rd and 17 to Parker Washington for the touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a great touch. I mean, couldn't have been put any better. Yeah, there was a lot to like from Mac Jones, and like I started the show off with, like, I'm not looking at Mac Jones as the former guy from Alabama who's at New England. Like, I'm just looking at, you gave a 6th-round pick for this quarterback. And right now, I think that 6th-round pick is paying dividends for what he could possibly be.
All right. You say roller coaster quarterback, and it got me thinking, who is in your mind is a roller coaster quarterback? Like, when you watch, like, does somebody come to mind that's like, oh, that's so fun? Oh, like Justin Fields had maybe a little bit of this in him. I remember at times the last 2 years, people were talking about as an MVP candidate, and then it was the worst pick ever made candidate. So, I mean, does somebody come to mind, Austin, or Hamby, when you guys say that?
I mean, obviously, I think about Jameis back when he was in Tampa. I think he led the league in passing yards, but also led the league in interceptions. I mean, I think if you want to compare it to Jacksonville, I think Gardner Minshew could be a good comparison because he had a lot of great playing that backyard football, but there was some mistakes as well. So I think Minshew here now, I think Minshew maybe has cleaned up a little bit, and obviously he's evolved as a quarterback in the league. But when he was here, I felt like it was a little bit of a roller coaster every once in a while.
Yeah, that's a good call. Hamby, you got any come to mind?
I mean, not really. I think Carson Wentz for me from a couple of years ago was kind of one where he'd have some games where a fumble and just like one of the worst picks you've ever seen, but always showed flashes like that he could have been a top 5 quarterback with his athletic ability, and he'd stand and make an insane throw.
Well, and now he's like the Tower of Terror more than the roller coaster. But I get what you're saying. I mean, come on, man. Come on. Let's come on.
Take it back.
I don't need to see the PFF numbers. Okay, it's the Tower of Terror.
It is amazing how not good he is. Like, that's crazy. And he was an MVP candidate, and now just doesn't play the position well. All right, I'm switching gears a little bit to a couple of things. I want to get to Trent Baalke in a moment, but we just mentioned Elijah Cook's name a couple of times. I tweeted this yesterday. I thought Cooks could have slammed the door shut on that sixth receiver spot, and he didn't. I thought he left it open. The problem is, Austin, I don't see anybody kicking down the door. I mean, I don't know if anybody's playing good enough football that makes you say, okay, well, that's going to be your 6th receiver. Heck, I'm starting to wonder if they just keep 5.
Well, they could keep 5. They could bring somebody in from a different team as well. I mean, when we start getting into the 6 wide receivers and everything, you have to have a good training camp. You have to have a good preseason to even solidify yourself to make that team because you're on the bubble already. And I agree with you. I don't think anybody's really solidified themselves. So do you keep 5 or do you look in terms of roster cuts? I mean, those could both be possibilities. But once again, if we're talking about our 6th wide receiver, regardless of who that guy's going to be playing in meaningful games, it's probably, once again, Hamby, bring out the panic button.
Hamby, what you got?
Elijah Cooks, I mean, look, it looked like he knew it. Honestly, it looked like he knew it. Slamming the fist into the ground. Obviously, I couldn't hear what he said. Probably didn't want to. But you kind of feel bad for him in a sense. Obviously, it's professional sports, but it looked like to me like I watched a guy know that he put his job in serious jeopardy because he didn't catch the football.
Listen, he did. He probably did, but the bottom line is this. I was thinking of it. He's got 2 years of resume now. You don't make one bad play. Tim Jones made a bad play in the preseason last year, and he still, made the team. So I don't think it erases everything. but it wasn't great. It left the door open. The problem is, here's your receivers. Josh Cephas, which the fan base was like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. Hasn't been. Seth Williams really hasn't done much. He's obviously made a name for himself last year, but he didn't really do much yet. Denzel Mims, who I thought looked good early in camp, hasn't really done much to show us much. Tim Jones is a reliable run blocker, and obviously on special teams. Does he come back? And somebody was asking me about this, and I said, listen, he might. But my gut says they're trying to maybe make that spot even better than Tim Jones. And that's no disrespect to him. I just think they're trying to improve it. He's hung around, though, for a couple years. Maybe he hangs around once again. And then who am I missing? Am I missing anybody there?
You're missing Trammell and Easton.
No, listen, Austin Trammell, he had a great game. Austin Trammell had a great game, and Easton makes a great catch. I'm not going to go with one game on Saturday night to say, okay, now Trammell's the guy. I think that's going to be the mantra in some parts because he looked pretty good, and he was the guy that we noticed, and good for him, by the way. That's what you're supposed to do. I just don't think I feel that way. I still think it's actually Elijah Cook's job to lose,
especially
but he could use a couple of nice plays this week in practice. And you said it, he's the tallest guy, 6'4". And I had somebody else mention, hey, he looked good on the gunner position as well. So these guys can all play special teams. That's what they're going to do, quite frankly. They're not going to catch passes, most likely, in an NFL game, if they're even activated. So it's probably even too much time on the sixth receiver. But I think it's an interesting moment the other night because it was just right in front of our face that thing could have been locked up. I mean, if he makes that catch on third down in the 2-minute drill and he goes for a touchdown, it's over, right? Everybody feels like it's over.
Yeah.
That's his job.
Or at least just even make the catch and turn. I mean, that safety could have made a play. I mean, it would have been a pretty crazy change of direction, but I'm not going to discount the safety for maybe making a play as well on that pass. But no, you still have to have it. You know, you can't have drops, especially when the lights are the brightest in a game. You know, despite what you do in practice to earn your reps in those preseason games, if you have too many of those drops, man, it doesn't matter, you know, especially where he's at. Like, if you're a starter, okay, that's one thing. But when you're talking about on the fringe of making a team, every one of those plays matters.
Yeah, I think you're right. And listen, other thing, Parker Washington's been awesome. Now I'm excited to see, can Parker Washington's game translate to the regular season? Can they find spots for him? Do they have to find spots for him? Will it translate? Will be this camp guy, the buzzing, everybody's talking about him, and then he has 3 catches all season? I don't know, but he looks the part, and he has lived up to everybody talking about him. So good for Parker Washington, the way he's been able to play. All right, yeah. Hamby, you've got some Trent Baalke. Oh,
hang on, can we go back to Parker Washington real quick? So, I mean, I think
sure.
So I think it was huge because a couple weeks ago when we started talking about how this team really likes him and he's coming from the slot, so how do they get him involved? And we kind of brought up, do they give him the Cooper Kupp treatment? And I thought it was very telling, even when you had a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. on the field, how I want to say it was the first pass of the game, it was an option route. It was literally a wide receiver option route where they give Parker Washington the luxury of saying, we trust you to make the right read here. You run the route how you want to run the route, and we'll make sure that, you know, Mac Jones gets you the football. That's exactly what happened. I think that's deafening in terms of how they feel about Parker Washington and maybe even getting him on the field in some kind of capacity during the regular season when you have an option route by a younger guy in a, you know, on the second team, quote unquote, running option routes and giving him that luxury. I think that speaks everything of how they feel about it. I think it speaks everything in terms of what he could be going forward.
Hey, I wanted to stay on that, Austin, then, because you're obviously very impressed, and I like what you're saying there. So you're basically telling us that he has earned the trust of Press Taylor, Doug Peterson, the quarterbacks in year 2 with very few snaps in games to be able to say, hey, it's up to you. And that's a big step, right?
It's everything, because I think, once again, it speaks volumes when you had Brian Thomas Jr. out there, who obviously everybody is very high on as well, and you want to keep giving him his confidence after a great training camp against this Buccaneers team and a good preseason game week 1 or preseason game number 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And the fact that, and I'm not sure if this was Press Taylor, if this was Doug Peterson, if this was Mac Jones, but the fact that, once again, the first passing play of the game was that option route saying, hey, Parker, we trust you, run how you want to run it, and let's go. I think that's everything.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. It's interesting. Listen, I continue to be fascinated by Parker because this was one that fans were all over last year, and a lot of draftniks said, man, they got a steal in the 6th round, this guy out of Penn State. And now you're seeing a guy that got dinged up, wasn't fully healthy, and had a year to get things under his belt, and he comes in this year and really takes that step. Like, that's how it's supposed to work. And now those fans and the draftniks that said, hey, this is a steal, look like they're right. Now you got to get him on the field. How can you get him on the field? How can you get him part of it and still not lose everything else you've got going on, which includes, obviously, Christian Kirk playing out of that position in the slot. But fascinating stuff and really a good observation from Austin Lane. All right, Trent Baalke said something that was really interesting, and we're going to have a few different sound bites from Trent if you missed it in the booth the other night. But I caught a couple of things here, and I wanted to see if you guys felt the same way, because there was at least one, if not two things that I hadn't heard yet that kind of caught my attention live during that broadcast when I was down there on the sideline listening. Hamby, take us wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah, first we're going to go to Trent talking about the second-year jumps from players. Since we're coming off Parker Washington, Elijah Cooks, he had some interesting to say about all the guys that they had on the field. Here it is.
Yeah, I think, we got 10 of the 11 guys we drafted still out here. And, that year 1 to year 2 jump that we always talk about is real. And I think you're starting to see it now with these guys.
So in going from, going into the second preseason game, you have joint practices. As an evaluator, how do you balance it between weighing what they do in practice and weighing what a young does in a game?
Well, it all matters. Obviously the game tape's the game tape, and you put a lot of stock in that. But you want to see how they work day to day, how they prepare both mentally and physically to get themselves ready for this day. And we're fortunate. We got a really good culture right now. These guys want to be here. They want to be involved. They bought in, and they're working tremendously hard, both on the field and in the classroom.
Well, that's Trent Baalke talking about that class, everything you guys just said. And I've heard Austin say this so many times, and I guess I just heard Trent Baalke say it, the year 1 to year 2 jump is real. I mean, some of it makes sense to me, Austin. I just don't, know exactly why that is such a trendy thing in the NFL. I've heard over the years that, hey, it's hard. You've got to learn to be a pro. So getting into the league and figuring out how to operate is a thing. I'm sure some of that's just natural maturation. Some of that is probably the weight room and growing into your body and other things. So it's probably a lot of different things, but it seems like it's a cliche for a reason around NFL circles.
It's definitely a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, because it's the truth. And I think there's a couple things that go into that phrase where you make the biggest leap from your first year to your second year. I think, first of all, you talk about that rookie wall where you're coming from college, you leave college, you have to train for the combine, and that's strenuous in itself. So you're not even really focused on football stuff. You're focused on running a 40-yard dash and having to bench press 225 as many reps as possible and all those things. So then you're focused on that for a couple months. And then you get drafted, and then you have to move to a new city, and that's a whirlwind. Then you have to get established in an NFL locker room, and those things get done differently. You're not going to school anymore. No one's telling you where to go. You have to do this by yourself. So there's a lot of physically and mentally taxing things that go into that transition from college to the pros. And then when you couple that with, oh, by the way, you're playing against the best football players in the world in front of you, and yeah, it's going to be a little faster. They're going to be a little stronger. Everything is so finite in the details now to be successful. It takes a lot to adjust to. And some, obviously players do that better than others. But then when you go in that second year, when you have time to rest in the off season, maybe you go to Vegas a little bit, maybe you go to the beach bars, wherever you're going, but you have time to unwind and decompress and just mentally kind of gather yourself, then you feel like a new man going into season number 2. So that's why I think you do make the most, the biggest leaps from talent from year 1 to year 2, just because it's such a whirlwind that first rookie year. Great English, Austin, but yeah.
Yeah, that's good English. You're okay. We don't care about that on the show. I think what's fascinating to me, Austin, I get that all those things make sense to me. It's logical. Here in Jacksonville, we haven't talked about this that much because I don't think we've seen a lot of it. I don't think we see a guy that's like, hey, year 1, not so good, and then boom. Luke Jokel, year 1, not so good. Year 2, not so good. Year 3, not so good. Like, we have more of those kind of examples than we do of guys that really took a leap. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see it right now, at least a small sample of it starting to take place, in part because the Jags have focused on it, too. The development has been a big thing. It's been a focal point. And to their credit, they are preaching it. And they are also walking that walk. Here's Trent Baalke talking about it. And I think this is where he says something that was fascinating. Listen to the timetable of how they kept the rookies here in Jacksonville this offseason.
Well, just the speed and the fact that, that's a tough position, as you know, Bucky, to come in as a rookie. That position's one of the harder ones to pick up. Tremendous effort on his part, learning the system. He's a smart young man, comes to work every day, and the older guys, proud of the older guys. They've wrapped their arms around him and helped him grow as fast as he can grow.
Another guy who has really impressed is Mason Smith, your second-round pick. Big, strong guy. And at times he looks like he's darn near hard to block. Yeah. Impossible at times.
Well, I think we got to remember with Mason, he's really played a year and a half of college football. He's a big man. He's an athletic guy. He's got a lot to learn. But the thing you love about him, and it's going to sound redundant, but these guys come to work. They really do. They've worked their tail ends off all offseason. We've structured it in such a way that we're giving them more reps than we've ever given the rookie class for a reason, to put them in those situations.
We talked about.
All right, I don't think he got to that last part where I was thinking he was going to get to, but that was on Brian Thomas Jr., Mason Smith. I thought it was pretty interesting to hear him say about Brian Thomas Jr., how difficult that spot is to adjust to. And I'll tell you this, Austin, from Friday, talking to Doug Peterson, they've been very happy with the way he's picked up the offense and the speed at which he's picked up the offense. I think there are some folks around the league coming out when he was being drafted that wondered if he could pick it up this quickly. And I think they've been pleasantly surprised, and he made another big play the other night.
You're talking about Brian Thomas Jr. here, Brent? Or
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And once again, it comes down to the IQ, which we've been hearing a lot of lately about how smart this dude is. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if draft experts just didn't look at his test scores, if they didn't talk to him, they just see what you see on film. But it's hard to tell on film sometimes of how guys learn, obviously, and how they go about their business. And I think Brian Thomas Jr., we've talked about this many times on the show. He's not going to be celebrating a lot. He's not going to be a vocal guy. He doesn't seem to let ego run his life. And he seems to be super smart and can obviously comprehend the playbook really well. Like, that's great and everything. And then when we talk about Mason Smith, I thought it was telling from Baalke saying he still has a lot to learn, right? So almost like, and we kind of knew this going in, maybe it's a little bit of a project, right? And we've seen in the past when the Jacksonville Jaguars have brought projects here, it hasn't always worked out well. When I say projects, I mean, okay, maybe they're more of a luxury pick and we can kind of plug and play them because we trust our coaches and we trust our scheme and everything. Taven Bryan's, stands out as one of those guys. Didn't work out. I think here, when you brought in Eric Armstead, and once again, the panic button has been lifted on Eric Armstead. Hope to see him week 1, obviously. But you don't need Mason Smith to come in and be that difference maker right away. Even though you drafted him in a higher round, I would have been nervous if Eric Armstead wasn't here. And it's like, all right, Mason, go out there and get your 20 to 30 reps a game. You don't need that now. So I think the plan in place, obviously, is for Eric Armstead now to try to groom Mason Smith, teach him, take him under his wing a little bit. And hopefully when we're talking about maybe week 9, week 10, we're talking about how Mason Smith, man, is contributing and he's picking up this defense pretty quickly.
Yeah, listen, it's a good call there. When they did the Taven Bryan thing, and maybe it was a luxury pick of some kind, they actually didn't set him up well. They asked him to play a couple of positions at once instead of just sticking him at one spot. They maybe probably had his head swimming a little bit, and who knows if that mattered or not, but it obviously didn't work out. I think what you just said, just think about the infrastructure around Mason Smith right now. They've got a lot of veterans on that defensive front. They've actually got his college coach on that side of the ball as well. So they've set him up very well to succeed, and he doesn't need to succeed right away so you can temper and lower the expectations because he's a little bit more raw. So if we are going to have a project, if you will, at least they've set it up in a proper spot to not demand too much out of him. One other note from that position, Austin, is it surprising how much Roy Robertson Harris continues to play this preseason?
Not really, because I think they're trying to check all the boxes with him to see exactly what they have, because there's a big investment in him, and I think they need him to obviously produce. So I'm not surprised, because it's still a competition, and he could be fighting for some playing time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I would say this to what you just said, and I'm not telling you you're wrong, but when you're spending $8, $9, $10 million on a guy, you shouldn't have to ask those questions, I don't think, right?
No, without a doubt. But if we go back the past couple of years, like, has Roy Robertson Harris, has the money justified the ability of what we've seen? And I think there's been some ups and there's been some downs.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, to your point. Very inconsistent. I think they have to find some consistency with him. Hamby, before we hit a break, I think we're going to find this one spot. I don't think what I was thinking about when Bulky was talking, he said in that last part of that soundbite. So see if you can take us in that direction.
All right. I think I might have to go back and revisit to find that particular one, because I got him on talking about the veterans that we brought in, and about all of the signings of the offseason as well.
Well, just give us, maybe not the veterans then. I'm going to read it to you just since we're on the topic, and I'll find it. Here's what I found fascinating about Bulky. I will get to it he basically said, Austin, that they kept the rookies for like 2.5 more weeks than they had previously the last couple of years. And I already think it's a long offseason for the rookies, the process and everything else, to maybe set you up for some struggles in your rookie season, along with everything else that you mentioned about 5 minutes ago. And the Jags said, you know what? We're not going to wait around on these guys. We want them to produce, but we have to, again, develop them. We have to get them used to what we're trying to do. And in doing so, they kept them longer than they have over the last couple of years. Does that stick out to you? I mean, I hadn't heard that yet, that they had kept them 2.5 weeks longer in the spring than they had in previous years.
Yeah,
I've got the quote here whenever you're ready.
I didn't hear that either. All right, Hamby, go ahead and play the quote.
He said, "We can't give them a rookie season. We've got to get them ready to play now. We kept them 2.5 weeks longer than we've kept the previous 2 rookie classes, so they got a shorter break."
Okay. So, like, when he says he kept them, like, so he just basically, it was like mandatory you're sticking around for the spring just to be around the building and everything?
Yeah, and I don't even know where the rules come into play and how often. I don't know what they did years prior.
NFLPA violation coming down the
pipe. No, I just don't know what they had done years prior and versus the calendar. I know Duggan let the veterans go and the mandatory mini camp in June. But the bottom line is, like, it doesn't matter all that dynamic. Of course, they weren't breaking rules, or he wouldn't have said it. But I just found that very interesting. That's how much they want invested into these guys. That's how much they want to load them up with. That's how much they want them to contribute right away instead of waiting around. Again, it just kind of confirms they are trying to practice what they preach, Austin.
No, and that's great. And I think the biggest thing when you talk about rookies, and this doesn't always apply, but if I'm a coach, if I'm a GM, I'm trying to instill this into my culture, is that when we expect our rookies to go out there, whether it's in a starting capacity or some sort of depth capacity, that they're ready to go. Because I think time and time again, we see rookies be put out there, and maybe they're not the most confident. Maybe they do make mistakes, and then in doing so, they never reach their full potential because you only get your first shot to make your first impression. Right, and sometimes a culture change is needed. Sometimes a change of scenery is needed. All of that stuff. But I'm saying from the guys that we have here, I expect that when we see Mason Smith, if we see Jones, whoever the case may be, when these younger guys get their call up, when they get their opportunity, they got to be ready. Because the last thing you want to see, and I think C.J. Henderson's a prime example of this, when you get thrown in the fire sometimes, you don't succeed, it can mentally daunt you, and then all of a sudden now it affects your play throughout the entire season. So I guess I like what Bulky is saying here. As long as it's not an NFLPA violation, as long as Roger Goodell's not twiddling his thumb saying, well, that's going to be a nice little hefty fine coming down the pipe. As long as we're having those conversations, you want to keep them a little longer, more power to you.
Well, okay, one last thing before we head to a break on this, because you just triggered something. You mentioned Jones. And so, okay, more impact for this rookie class. Well, Mason Smith, we just called maybe a project a little bit. Brian Thomas, obviously, is going to have impact. And then let's go to the third-round guy in Jarian Jones before we get to the Jordan Jeffersons of the world and everybody else. Isn't it pretty clear, guys, that Jarian Jones is not going to kind of be in that starting lineup? I mean, he's playing deep into these games. You can usually tell with how much guys are playing if they're going to be a part of that early rotation. It feels like he's not a part of their plans to play immediately in September. Do you get the same vibe?
Yeah, I mean, I get the same vibe. I think there's going to be guys ahead of him for sure. They're going to ease him into it. They're not going to throw him in the starting role right away. But also, I mean, we saw Brian Thomas Jr. play against, the Bucks, and he's obviously going to be a bona fide starter. So I think it's about getting your young guys some more reps and everything, but I wouldn't be expecting Jarian Jones to be starting week 1.
And with the depth chart, too.
Yeah, and Hamby, just to clarify there, and Austin's right, Brian Thomas Jr. did play, and he actually played a decent amount, but then he came out. And Jarian Jones was still in that game, I want to say, even in the fourth quarter, because I noticed it was at least late third quarter. So reps are one thing, and I get that, and they were trying to get their young guys reps. That's part of this whole thing, this whole development. But, Hamby, I just felt like watching that game, I'm like, he's not in this, front side. It's definitely Darby and Campbell. And then wherever you want to put, Johnson and Savage, and which then would speak to Savage playing the nickel spot, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it has to be. I mean, everything that, I think I'm trying to find Jarian's snap count real quick, but man, it seemed like he played well into the third quarter.
While you're doing that, I'll keep yapping for you, because the one other thing about that is, if Savage could go to that nickel spot, but also Christian Braswell has been playing well enough that maybe he's the guy that's able to contribute in that secondary before even Jarian Jones contributes, Austin. So maybe it's the play of a guy like Braswell, along with some of their additions and draft picks, that have bumped Jarian Jones down the list a little bit, at least in my mind. I'm not telling you it's a done deal, but it certainly looks that way.
I mean, you could assume it that way, but once again, I think where Jarian Jones was taken and everything, and the expectations that have been set forth for him, I think he's still going to be a bona fide 2 in terms of depth and everything. I think, once again, you just have a rookie guy that they're trying to get reps, they're trying to see more things, because once that regular season starts, he won't be in there that much. So you have to get it in now, and then hopefully that he can pick up reps in the film room and reps at practice.
Well, Hamby, you can get us that number if you have it. But the one thing here now, you're looking at a draft class that I think people will be critical of in a sense, because last year it was Anton Harrison, and then Antonio Johnson came along and played. Everybody else, while they played a little bit, didn't deliver. This draft class, what we're talking about, it's Brian Thomas Jr. is going to play a lot. But outside of that, I'm not sure who's playing. And, I mean, more than 8-9 snaps a game, I'm not sure who's playing out of this draft class. Oh, Cam Little, by the way, he might be the next, obviously the biggest guy coming out of the draft class with the big leg. Did you find the snaps, Hamby? It's okay if you don't have it.
Yeah, I got him. He's at 34, which is a pretty substantial amount. I mean, Braswell played 15, Buster Brown played 12. So I think that kind of tells you a little bit about.
Well, yeah. Braswell had a hip injury, by the way, so they didn't bring him back in. So that was a little bit a part of maybe why he didn't play more snaps. But it also showed you that they wanted to protect him. I think he could have gone back in, but they like the way he's been playing.
Yeah, and Trey Prince had 27. So Jarian had pretty much, other than Hallett, he had the most snaps of any DB or corner.
Okay. Well, and I'm going to go with Austin here too. I'm not going to. This isn't alarming to me. It's just an observation and a feel that, hey, it looks like Jarian Jones isn't in that initial rotation. But Austin also is right. They're trying to get these guys reps. I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. played more in that game than I thought he would, actually. And he is a starter. You're right. He's going to run out there with the first team next week and on September 8th. So it might be a little bit of a mix and match. We'll see where it all lands.